Welcome to the Talking with the School of Transportation podcast with your hosts, Ian Campbell and Harnek and Ian. Let's get into it now. Welcome back to the Talking with the School of Transportation podcast. I'm Ian Campbell, here as always with Harnek and Ian.
Welcome, folks. We got joining us today, Jason D'Amico and Alister Lopes.
Hey, good day, guys. Thanks for having us.
How's it going, everyone?
So, Alister, what do you teach here at Centennial College? Oh, and I think we're presented by Centennial College now. We got the approval.
Yeah.
Oh, we're fancy. We're official.
I didn't get the memo.
Yeah, but
Check
now
your
with Mr. D'Amico here, I'm not sure how that
Yeah,
approval is going to stand.
funding's been slashed.
Yeah. There's funding?
I mean,
For some people,
there was.
I have
not for
yet to know.
everybody.
Alister, what do you teach here?
So I teach for the AST day release program. My majority of the time I've been teaching has been drivetrains, level 1, 2, and 3. And right now they've moved me into fuels and electrical for level 1 and level 3 so far. So it's good. I enjoy it.
Beyond that, though, you've taught night release level 3. So
Yeah, I did night release level 3, which was everything level 3. I've done a handful of level 1 courses, level 2 courses. So I've been around the block, so to speak.
What's your preferred course?
I really do like electrical level 3 because the students are a little bit more advanced in terms of theory, and you can kind of throw diag at them for the classroom, and they really get their head scratching in lab. They're like, "What's going on here?"
Okay. And Jay, you're relatively new here, right? So you haven't taught much.
Yeah, almost pushing 2 decades. I'm getting a handle on this now. Yeah, 18 years.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm starting to feel a little comfortable coming out of my shell a bit. I'm working on it.
That's not like you. You're
No, I know.
quiet.
But I got to open up a bit every now and then. I'm trying.
For those of you that haven't had Mr. D'Amico, he's the guy that yells in the hall really loud.
Also yells in the rooms, yells in my car. Yeah.
He actually doesn't have a microphone right now. He's in the other room.
I don't need one.
Just
You
yelling
hear
at
him
us.
from
Yeah.
where he is right now.
I'm over in A block. Can you guys see me okay?
So a better question for you is probably, what haven't you taught?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there's an answer for that.
Okay.
Every subject, every area, apprenticeship, diploma programs, co-op, a little bit of auto body when the need arises. I can't think of anything top of my head. I rotate around a lot.
How about math?
Yeah, I have not taught any of the non-mechanical subjects.
Okay.
Well, lucky you.
Yeah, give me the electrical, the powertrains, suspension, air conditioning, engines, all that stuff. But yeah, I haven't been put in any of the fluid power or newer programs or post-secondary electives, nothing like that.
Yeah.
And do you have a course you prefer to teach?
I don't think anyone's ever asked my opinion when they make my timetable. I guess if I had a say in it, probably just because of the structure of the labs, I'd have to go like level 1, level 2 engines.
Okay.
Right? Same powertrains is almost identical, right?
Yeah.
Like
those
the
are good.
equipment we have, the bench space, and all the teardowns. Probably powertrains and engines. Those have got to be my 2 favorite subjects, strictly because of the lab content.
Great.
Perfect.
I like it. Well, since you said powertrains, and Alister, you teach mainly powertrains.
Yep.
I think we'll talk about clutches today because I saw a meme the other day. I think, Alister, you showed it to me.
Yeah.
And it was this guy with a really jacked calf on his left leg.
Mustang owner?
Yeah, it must be.
I'm feeling like it. Mechanical clutch.
Other
He
leg was
crashes
broken
into
from the
everything, or
crash.
what?
No, the mechanical clutch and the heavy spring force.
Yeah.
That's the 5.0 driver.
Oh, yeah.
Fox
There it is.
bodies.
Mm-hmm. So clutches, like you teach clutches level 1. That's the starting point, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we get into like the fundamentals of friction and fluid and stuff like that, and then we get into how a clutch works. Because if you don't know the basics, then it's not going to make any sense to you. So yeah, we start off with clutches. The thing I like in the drivetrains lab is we have some really good, recently some new mock-ups or training aids. So there's a clutch mock-up which you can actually see the pressure plate, the fingers moving and everything. Students can kind of relate because you're talking, and I always get this every year when I teach it. They get confused between like a disengaged and an engaged clutch, pedal on, pedal down, or pedal up. They're like, "Oh, well, sir, what do you mean?" No, there's we have to figure out: is it engaged or disengaged? Is it are you pushing on the pedal or release the pedal? So something like that with that mock-up, they can actually see it, and maybe that turns the wheels.
Yeah, but we have the same issue always when you're trying to get across insufficient and excessive.
Yeah.
Those terms, just putting them into a physical reality, there seems to be like always a huge disconnect.
That's true.
And the clutch is perfect. Like clutch disengaged, pedal up, right? pedal down, clutch disengaged. They bounce back and forth between those to the point where, like drawings before we had the mock-ups, I would draw a pedal, a foot, and then I would draw, the two drive members and the driven member, and I would draw the relationship. Look, here's my foot, here's the pedal,
or not? Yeah.
here's what's going on inside that single dry disc clutch assembly.
Okay, so
And even then, it's just hard to get through.
for a student that's disengaged, how would you explain what clutch disengaged means simply?
Well played. Well played.
Yeah, bounce on words.
When you're sitting there in class, you're not paying attention. You're disengaged.
Oh, we didn't
You're
mean the
not-
student. We meant the client.
Oh, sorry.
How would you simplify something?
Probably because, like, if you go by just what you instinctively think right off the bat without knowing, it's the default position of the clutch.
Yeah.
Right. It is fully engaged at rest on its own. Your leg is hanging out the window. That is the at rest position. So because they're mechanically changing the position of the pedal, they kind of always lock into the fact that, well, if I'm pushing a pedal, I must be disengaging or engaging something.
Right.
And they mix the two up all the time.
It is a big point of contention.
Yeah, kind of counterintuitive to what you think.
Yeah, and they're like test questions when I, reviewing that. Okay, guys, the clutch is disengaged. Like, oh, sir, but I thought you said her pedal's on the foot or not on the foot.
Yeah.
Well, which one is it? And that's up to you.
Doesn't
to
matter
figure
what
out.
the pedal's saying. What's the clutch doing at that
Exactly. I didn't say pedal. I said clutch.
point? And you mentioned friction earlier, and I'm really glad Jay's here because you teach friction so well, and the coefficient of friction and what it means in the automobile or just the world.
It's that science background. I didn't always fix cars, right?
Yeah, and
Scientist.
what is so important about the COF or friction in general?
It's like I always tell the students, it doesn't matter what subject area, right? I always start out by saying, like, what makes a car work? Like, it's a machine, plain and simple, right? No matter what decade you go through, what period, it's a machine. It's got to obey certain laws, right? So, I'll start out by saying, like, go through high school, think of all the subjects you took, like, which two are the most relevant for the job you're doing today, right? And the answer, it's cut and dry. Some students will get it, man. It's a machine. It works off two principles, math and science. It does not work off English,
Art.
poetry, art, music class.
Feelings.
Yeah. Well, that's what I always say. I don't lay my hands on the vehicle and feel. I don't go with my gut as to what I think is wrong. It's math and science is a direct answer. So the better the student can understand, like, the basic math and science principles, the cars are the easiest thing in the world to work on. They're machines, right? There's no randomness to it. There has to be a logical path to whatever your issue is and whatever your corrective response is to repair it, right? So I know I'll take the little bit of a survey too. Like, before I give away that tidbit of information, I'll say, hey, guys, high school, it sucked. Nobody liked it. I get you. It was the worst 8 years of my life too. But then I'll be like, which two subjects did you hate the most? And usually math is the first one. And then science will be the follow-up. And they'll say, it's interesting because you guys have chosen a career that is largely based on math and science. So it's your admitted weak point, and you're going into a field that requires it to be your strong point.
Yeah.
So when you can't get them to make those connections, there's no more kind of gut feelings on cars. Like, just get the simple math down pat, right? Get your coefficient of friction, get your kinetic energy, understand your hydraulics laws, your air pressure laws, and that way when you go to diagnose any symptom on the vehicle, you're thinking in those scientific terms. It will lead you to the correct answer. But if you don't know the principles and the foundations, you're kind of just diagnostic dartboard at parts. And then that's when your diagnostic approach becomes, well, what's the cheapest part to start with? What's the easiest part to change?
And then what's next when it doesn't fix?
Yeah.
I really like that you said that because it changes from being a diagnostic technician to just being a parts replacer.
Yeah. And
Right. If you actually understand and can build that knowledge and understand how that component works, it really changes things.
yeah, and when I totally get, maybe the industry has changed where we have kind of transitioned to more of a parts replacing industry. But what are you here for? You want to be a technician. Technicians understand, they diagnose, right? Bring out a 2-tier system then. Like, bring out an installer class license. And hey, you know where that part goes. You know the torque spec, and it's 2-hour book time, but you can nail it in 1. Great, you're an excellent installer.
So,
But a
it's funny
technician,
that-
you can stop them and say, hey, that part in your hand, tell me everything you know about that part in their operation. That's the tech,
But
right?
it's funny that you said that, having the 2-tiered system. I actually had a student, and this is years back when I was teaching night release. He came up to me and said, sir, can't remember what dealership he was working at, but he's like, my service manager just wants me to throw parts at a car. Throw a part at a car, kick it outside, move on to the next one. And eventually that car comes back for the same problem. And he goes, what should I do? And I told him, you should leave that shop. You should go somewhere else where they actually give you the opportunity to diag and to figure out how it works and fix it. If all they want is you throwing parts at a car, you're not fixing anything.
Problem is, though, some places have an incentive for that.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is the service of the week we're selling, and the whole flat rate structure is counterintuitive to an apprentice learning. Like, it shouldn't be there, in my opinion, right? You're there to learn, so learning takes time, right?
So I guess
Focus
my
on that.
question is, what's coefficient of friction?
So when we look at coefficient of friction, like I always break it down to, guys, don't get in over your head. Like, let's just look at the root words. Like, coefficient, that means relationship, right? Friction, forces between bodies at rest or body in motion.
Yeah.
So great, we're talking about coefficient of friction. It's the relationship between materials, right? And then you get into the math and all that to prove, what's a low COF, what's a high COF. So once you can get, kind of that through, it's like, okay, now we're going to turn it around, these materials. So I'll teach, a low COF, something that works out to be pullover weight, tensile force divided by weight force of the object. And then you're like, okay, this is 0.1 mu, so it's 1/10 COF, right? In English, it would slide very, very easily. And then I'll go with something that's like a 100-pound object requires 300 pounds of tensile force. All right, it's a 3.0. This does not slide easily. In fact, we're above a 1.0 threshold. Material is going to be exchanged between the two surfaces. And the example of that, I'll throw it out there in class. That's your contact patch between the tire and the road. So then I'll bring it back to brakes, which everybody, you start on fluids, you get to do some tires, and then you're slapping brake parts on. And I'll ask a simple question like, so what is the coefficient of your brake linings, your average OEM friction lining with your average OEM rotor? Is it more towards the 1/10 where it slides very, very easily, or is it more towards like a 3.0 like a tire? And I'll get answers that, it's a very high COF. I'm like, but no, guys, if you understand brakes, like definition of brakes,
They're locking up.
kinetic energy converted into heat. We need that. And then I have them do the old slide the hands together, lightly feel the heat. I go, that's your brakes, man. You want them to slip to produce that heat because that's how we scrub it away from the vehicle. Can't create matter, can't destroy it, convert it from form to form. So, but it's still like, even after that discussion, like the go-to answer is, your brakes have a very high friction level. No, man, then we'd all be eating dashboards.
Yeah.
You'd be afraid to touch that brake pedal.
Smashing your teeth.
And once they lock up, they do zero conversion. Your tire steps up. And we all know tires aren't very good at being brakes. They're real good like one time. And then the ride's a little rough after that. So yeah, it's kind of like I find a lot of students, they don't want to know the science behind stuff. They don't want to know how it works. They just want to get it fixed. But it's like, guys, if you understand like something as simple as friction, now when we have clutch complaints, drivability complaints, clutch chatter, right? Combination of mixed COFs.
Yeah.
It all plays into the diag.
Yeah.
And for guys that are like, pad slapper if it was brakes, but for clutches, there's a lot of guys, man, they'll go through the work to drop down the transaxle or transmission, and they throw up just the friction disc.
Yep.
Right? Hey, if it came in the kit cheap enough, there's a pressure plate on there. But they leave that first drive member there, that flywheel that's got 300,000 K on it. Right. That surface, it's got the heat checks, it's got the glazing.
Slick as anything.
Yeah, you can't count on one drive member to hold one side of the disc, and the other one's got a COF of next to zero. And then they wonder why, the OEM clutch went, 200,000 K, and when we replace clutches, they're gone at 50, they're gone at 40. Must be driver abuse. No, man, you're leaving one slippery part up there. The thing's going to superheat 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. The clutch assembly, it's lost its friction on one side. So now you're getting by with 2,000 pounds of clamping force, but a low COF. It's just a battle of, hey, this thing's done at 20 K again.
Yep. Or if it's someone who's learning how to drive stick.
Yeah. Well, let's not throw stones. I'm getting better at it.
Sorry.
Right.
I think that's one of the reasons
now.
students have difficulty understanding clutches is most cars today are not equipped with a manual transmission.
Yeah.
Right. I've heard of like a lot of stories where someone breaks into a car to steal the car. They realize it's a manual and then they leave the car because they don't know how to start it.
Yeah. Well,
right?
the new standards in automatic.
Yeah. And even
it
as
has
far as
been since the 80s.
you have to special order a manual car if you're picking it, if you want that.
Well, there's really.
I don't see many manual Wranglers being sold anymore.
From a production point of view, there's absolutely no advantage to a manual. Manual technology was as great as it was going to be 1990.
Yeah.
You had your Synchro Mesh GM synchro assemblies. That was about the pinnacle of it right there. And maybe they threw in Speed 6. That was it, man. But automatics, You cannot outshift an automatic.
No, of course.
No,
And
I've
then you've
seen
got
Fast and the Furious. They have those manual
Double
9-speed
clutch and not
transmissions.
granny
Yeah.
shifting, like
Well, they are either fast or furious. Yeah, they can't be both.
9 reverse gears.
But yeah, like when you've got 9-speed automatics overrunning 2 gears at the same time, there is 0 shift point.
and you can't shift faster than
No,
fluid.
nothing.
Nobody.
shifts faster than
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get your CVTs out there. As dry and unexciting as they are.
Yeah.
They work.
Yeah. So from a shifting performance point of view, you can't beat the automatics.
Yeah.
And then you add in the retail aspect of it. Who can drive an automatic? Everybody.
That's
So
a
the
big factor. It's who's buying the new
It's
cars.
sales, man.
Who's buying the new cars?
Try to find a base model car. They have one advertised, so legally they can say it's $15,000. Yeah, there's one in Ontario. And all the other ones are package C, package D, full power groups.
Yeah.
It's what consumers want. Nobody wants a manual. They're useless. I like them, but they're useless.
Yeah. You're going to find it's niche, right? You're going to have the guys who are spending the money because they enjoy the vehicle. But for a lot of people, having a vehicle, they don't really care about it. It's just something that they need to get
yeah,
on made
and
to
then
be, right?
they don't want to be driving a manual car and stop and go traffic in the
Yeah.
city and stuff like that, right? If that's your daily commute, you're sitting in half an hour of traffic.
But then what's the lifespan of a vehicle now? It used to be the average consumer was 7 years. I think it's down to like 4 now.
Yeah.
So even if you have the ability to drive a manual and you enjoy manual, think about your resale. Everybody's always wanting to resell stuff these days. Hell, they don't want to lose a penny. They tend to want to make money when they sell it. If you've got a manual, you just cut off 95% of your audience.
I do find the people who are buying vehicles with manuals, they do want to keep them long term, though.
Yeah, that's not
Right,
their everyday
that's-
driver.
yeah.
You know, especially
Yeah.
if it's like a muscle car or something like that, stored in
Yeah,
the garage,
so
doesn't
that's-
see rain, snow.
That's the odd guy here or there.
Yeah.
The bulk of the driving population, they don't care about that.
Well, think of the
They want
bulk
their
of the
resale.
driving population is like that are buying new cars anyway, 30 and up, right? With families, you're not seeing that manual desire anymore.
It's funny when I was at the dealership and I my background is Chrysler, so I remember way back when we do some of the training, they're like, "Hey, this Ram comes in manual." I was like, "I've never seen a manual Ram before." Sure enough, one day this Ram shows up and it's a 6-speed. I'm like, "Oh, this is like the holy grail. I've never seen this before ever. Only heard about it, and finally here's one." But that was like one in my whole career that I've ever seen.
Yeah, we had at the shop. This is going back, quite some time for you guys.
1932.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you were alive yet, but there was a thing called the Mazda MPV.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Multi-purpose vehicle.
Yeah,
Yep.
so we had.
Is that what it stands for?
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Yeah, so we had one. I believe it was all-wheel drive and a manual transmission.
I've seen
No way.
all-wheel drive.
Like
I've
there
seen
was-
manual, but I've never seen it.
There was no
combined.
such animal ever. Turns out there was like 3 in North America.
Wow.
So anytime you call for parts, they'd be like, the dealer would say, there's no listing. Like those aren't options that exist till you found the right dealership that remembered you. And they're like, is it the green one or the blue one? Because there's only 3 in the country, man.
Yeah.
And those are probably crushed.
Yeah, and that
somewhere
guy
now.
loved that vehicle. I remember he had on, this is back in the 90s, he had his leather gloves with the fingers cut off, the knuckle holes, his Ray-Ban glasses.
Driving the van.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, when
best-
something like that then does come in for service, you get a technician who, like you're saying, will replace 2 of the parts, but not everything. They haven't really thought it through. This is the guy who's really going to spend the money to fix his car, wants it fixed properly, and then he gets the technician that doesn't know what they're doing.
Right? Like he's probably never even seen one before. So how's he going to fix it?
Yeah, well, that's the thing too. Like if you're gonna, I don't want to say half-ass, but if you're gonna half-ass something, always look at it. Hey, if you don't do this job right, what's the resulting comeback?
For sure.
Was this a 1-hour clutch? Like I can do Volkswagens on the side of the road. So okay, if you're gonna cut corners and slack and bite the bullet on a comeback, it's an hour of your life gone.
Yep.
But I've done other units. They're like 12-hour jobs.
Yeah,
Like this thing's got to be dialed in perfect. You cut no corners, no edges. And then if it's that guy with that one-off oddball car and he thinks it's the Ferrari of minivans, it's got to be tight. It's got to be perfect.
Yeah, that's true.
But you saying that, what's this going to cost you in terms of time? I always talk to students, and when we're talking about fixing it, someone like, "Oh, sir, just throw a part at it. That'll fix it." And I said, "What if it doesn't? Do you work for free? Because you're gonna on the second time when that car comes back and you haven't fixed it the first time."
Yeah, but I find a lot of that stuff is like excuses. Like when we talk about diagnosing a vehicle, they always, the list of excuses, I've been hearing them for almost 20 years, they're pretty standard and verbatim. One will be I don't get paid enough to diagnose. And then you can shut these down pretty easily. And I say, okay, well, hold on. I'll pay you whatever you want. Well, you know what? It takes too long to diagnose. Hey, buddy, we got all day. Like, so that excuse is gone. Ultimately, if you keep busting their excuses, it comes down to they can't do it.
Right.
So then just say you don't have the ability, you don't have the knowledge, and that's what you're supposed to learn. But don't try to sugarcoat it with blaming your employer. Oh, he won't pay me enough. Oh, they don't want to look at it. Like, are you a technician or an installer?
Yeah. That goes to the two-tier system we were talking before.
Well, because we're tying in the retail to skilled labor. So, and I'll tell them all the time, like, guys, I have a few C of Qs done. Nowhere on any of those exams do I ever remember seeing a dollar sign.
Yeah.
And nothing about time. It's irrelevant. That's the retail aspect starting to tip in on that, right? So you're supposed to be learning the technical aspect, but the retail clouds it all the time where now we've got offshore parts that are $30.
Right.
So yeah, there is that retail argument of why would we charge 1 hour diagnosis at $150 an hour when the part is $30? Hey, Identifix is out there, forums are out there. Let's just throw in the $30 part.
Yeah, the forums.
But then, if that's the route you go, you're going to be eliminated very shortly because customers can also watch that YouTube video, order that same $30 part.
Yeah.
Hey, it's 20 minutes to change. And now you wonder why, your business is starting to go down. You want to have that knowledge and skill. No one else can do, man. You want to set up that final drive and run that pattern. You want to be that guy. You don't want to be the shop that subs that out.
But we could be YouTube certified.
Yeah.
And
you know what really grinds my gears?
We're doing that all day. That's what we're doing.
I like that. That's a good one.
Clutching at straws there.
Yeah.
So back to clutches a little bit.
Oh yeah, we're talking about
How do they
clutches.
work?
How do they work?
Yeah. Oh, geez.
Oh, which ones are we going for? Hold on. Let me
etiquette there.
Let me just search this up here on Wikipedia. Give me a second.
Well, according to Google.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, your single dry disc clutch?
Yeah, just the basic
basics.
clutch.
So again, it goes
things,
back
man. Friction and force.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have the clamping force and the frictional force between the driving members and the driven members, right? So we need to figure out what's who's connected to who.
Yeah.
Right. That's a big battle.
So let's list off those driving members and driven members. Let's kind of list those off a little bit.
All right, so we'll go with our engine crankshaft. That's our torque output, right?
Yeah.
That we want to get that torque to the input of the transmission. So our clutch is the middleman in between, right? So no automatics, no torque converters. We don't understand those. Get those out of the way. So we're going to look at, we need a direct mechanical connection to our crank. It's our first driving member, right? That flywheel. Right, so there's our flywheel. So
Bolted straight on.
Directly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
whatever the crank does, flywheel matches,
Exactly.
speed and torque-wise, 100% no loss. Then on the other end, we've got our transmission input shaft. Let's put our friction lining on there, our clutch disc. Let's spline that guy on there. Let's have a mechanical connection 1-to-1. Speed is identical, torque is identical. So now we got to get to our pressure plate assembly, our second driving member. That's easy, man. That is bolted to the first driving member, which is bolted to the crank. So crank, flywheel, pressure plate, they all move as one, speed, torque-wise. Now we got to get it to that clutch disc, which is still a mystery to me to this day, Alistair.
It's magic. There's some sort of
When in
wizardry
doubt,
going on in there.
witchcraft or voodoo?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
One
go
of the
that
two.
route.
That's normally what the students say on a test, too.
All right, so I got all the mechanical connections covered. So crank, flywheel, and pressure plate, they move as one assembly.
Yeah. Crank, flywheel, pressure plates are all bolted together.
Yeah,
And then
mechanical, it might as well be welded.
and that's sandwiching your clutch in the middle of that, which is going to be splined to the transmission, right?
Exactly.
So you have two separate setups, essentially.
Yeah. So no straight mechanical connection to the two drive members or that clutch disc. So it's really going to come down to clamping force and friction.
Yeah.
Where it's like if you want to pick up a 10-pound block without curling your fingers around it. Keep your hands straight and just crush it with pressure and pick the block up without actually grabbing or molding around the block. That's all that's happening there.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a drive member sandwich. It's a party.
Drive member sandwich.
Yeah.
I might keep that in my resources.
That phrase is copyright now.
Well, so talking about the pressure plate, I always tell students, there's a ton of pressure that's being applied to that clutch when we engage it. And then I go, well, pedal up or down? Oh, they scratch their heads, right? But
That's
so when
the mystery again.
When it's engaged, there's a ton of force. And, I can talk till I'm blue in the face in the classroom saying, it's 1,500 pounds of clamping force or 3,000 pounds or whatever the case may be. And then we get to the lab and I actually have a pressure plate, flywheel, and clutch disc assembly. And I tell them, push on the pressure plate fingers. Are you guys strong enough? I picked the biggest guy in class. Hey, push on those pressure plate fingers and get the clutch disc to release. And then they glue in like, well, there's a lot of force back there.
Yeah.
So to overcome that, then we talk about mechanical advantage. I don't think we talked about that yet.
No,
Because that's another thing that has to do with our clutches and how we can.
But pressure aside, with the two drive members crushing that disc, you also got your friction in there, right?
100%.
And it's static friction.
Yep.
Static friction is much higher than dynamic, right? So one of the things I'll do is I'll say, hey, you know what? I'll leave my house and I'll shift first, second, third. I'll get on the highway and I'll drive 3 hours straight to Windsor, right? Just stay in fifth all the way to Windsor. And then I'm going to get out real quick and reach in that bell housing and grab that clutch. And like, oh, your hand's going to get burned. No, man, it's static.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's no heat. It's static. And then, eventually we compared discs, clutch disc assemblies to brakes.
Yeah.
They're the same linings.
Yep.
Exact same function, but opposite ends, man. Brakes love kinetic, statics love, clutches love static. And then I'll be like, guys, look at the lining on a disc. Like, see how thin they are? Why don't they make them really thick like brake pads? And then guys will scratch their head, right? And they're like, oh yeah, that clutch would last forever. I'm like, but dude, it lasts forever when
It
it's
already
thin.
does. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've put cars in the scrapyard with the OEM clutch still.
Mhm.
Like, I'll get 500K out of them. So, and they're like, yeah, why is it that thin? I'm like, because it's not doing any work. 95% of its life, it's static. It's just getting sandwiched in there, man. The only time that clutch is going to wear and those pressure plates and flywheel surfaces is when you're slipping the clutch.
Yeah. When you're engaging, disengaging.
Yeah, and then
catch point.
that's kind of a hard one to wrap the head around too. And I compare it to the pedal, right?
Yep.
And when your mouth is wrong, your hands are right. And we start showing with our hand. I'm like, look, dude, pedal all the way up, top dead center, highest point. I go, nothing's going on with the clutch assembly. Pedal all the way down, like no defects, fully disengaged. The members are physically separated with an air gap.
There's no
Nothing's
friction.
going on. Anytime you are in between top dead center and bottom dead center, you are slipping the clutch. That's the kinetic world.
And if you're shifting properly, that should be a quick interaction.
Yeah,
within
that's
5
right.
seconds,
Minimal
this thing's
wear, right?
1,500
So-
degrees. Yeah, most guys are like, without dumping the clutch, it's like 2 to 3 second shift. It's practice makes perfect, right?
Unless you're resting your foot
Yeah.
there and just chilling.
Well, and then they'll,
That's another thing I was asking my students. I'm like, hey, if you're driving a manual car, there's 3 pedals and there's something on the far left. What is that? And they're like, I don't know. That's the rest pedal.
Yeah.
That's where you put your foot in between shifts.
Yeah, throw in the fourth pedal under the dash there.
The
Parking
headlight
brake.
switch?
No, that was under. That one on the carpet. That one. No, man, parking brakes when they used to be on there. Now you got 4 pedals under a car. So I was telling them, well, one is, low speed clutch, and the one on the far left, that's your high speed clutch. So when you're on the highway, going from bringing it out 4 to 5, man, you stomp that bad boy
Is that why you
down.
lose so many students?
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that's maybe one of the reasons. I never said I was good at this job. I've just been here a long time. So that's why I tell them, anytime you're between top dead center and bottom dead center of the pedal, you're in the slip element, right? And then they go, what is slip? And I'm like, well, guys, we said, the 2 drive members are doing effectively what the crank does. You got to remember the disc is doing effectively what the tranny does, which is through the
wheels.
gear
Training
ratio
to
is
the
the
wheels,
wheels.
yeah.
They're moving at different speeds. So anytime those members don't match up, they are slipping. You have a speed loss.
Yeah.
And that's going to produce your heat, which is what the clutch is meant to do for 2-3 seconds.
Yeah, for a certain amount of time.
So
and
5 seconds, we start smelling
burn
almost
clutch.
asbestos. Yeah.
Can you quickly, just simply, one of you guys, explain static friction versus kinetic friction?
Okay, so static friction is friction at rest. Any 2 surfaces or any 2 objects where they're not moving, there's friction and static friction in between. Kinetic or dynamic friction is friction of something in motion. So, we got it in brakes, we got it in clutches. So your pads and rotors,
Sliding,
you've got
right?
sliding friction. Yeah, that's the difference, and that's the one that also I feel gets my students, because I'll ask them, what do we have on a clutch pedal? Do we have static or kinetic? And they'll say, oh, we just have static. Or someone would say, we just have kinetic. No, we have both.
What
And
are
it's
we
how-
doing?
It's how you're driving it, right?
Depends on the scenario.
And which of those types of friction do we want? We want more static friction than kinetic friction on a clutch disc, because the more kinetic friction we have, the more wear we have.
Yeah, but we can do the same with brakes
Yeah,
too. Like
yeah.
back when we, had to know how to drive, my brakes normally under ideal conditions, they are a dynamic setup. They're kinetic energy, right? I can easily switch roles and go static.
Yeah.
It's brake lockup. So guys know the term brake lockup, but I'm like, do you know what brake lockup means? And I explain the friction, right? I go, the pads and the rotors or the shoes and the drums, they become static. There is 0 heat exchange. They are turning at one speed. They are locked up. They are one and the same. They are locked up. That's where that term comes from. So a lot of these terms guys throw out, they don't know the origin behind them. So anytime you can kind of make a connection, okay, guys know brake lockup. Like if you just bring that in class, say, guys, what are locked up brakes? And then everybody's going to go "Rrrr," and make the noise. Right. Okay, good. But now what's actually happening there on a scientific level? Like it's a machine. And that's where it kind of, nobody knows, right? Well, the brakes are locked. Okay, but what does locked mean? Locked is another way of saying the brakes have gone static. The assembly is static. You no longer have your braking.
Yeah.
And your tires stepping up.
So that's basically kind of summing up the clutch assembly, right? That would be the three driving member or the three
Yeah,
components.
we're talking like single dry disc
Yeah,
clutch,
very,
right?
very simple
Like no
clutch
dual
setup.
mass
No,
flywheels,
we
no
don't need any of that.
centrifugal pressure plates.
We can get into that another time.
No, we can't. I just saw those terms on TV. They sounded cool. I want to say them on the radio.
I have a
here.
list of Google words that I
have
have
a-
talk about today.
Baba Booey, Baba Booey, Baba Booey. Like I just want to be on the radio.
So I have a question for Harnek,
Yeah.
who's not a drivetrains teacher at all.
Nope.
Can you sum that up in your own words?
Which part?
Everything.
Fine, fine
I will
automatic.
say like between the static and the kinetic friction, because I do SSB so much, explain it very much the same way. I do things a little bit different. I put my water bottle down on the desk and I say, why isn't this sliding around right now? And they say, well, between the desk and the water bottle, there's static friction. That's what gives me my traction, right? With kinetic friction, if I'm moving this around, now I have kinetic friction. And then I use that same example of rub your hands together.
Yeah, but
What's
then the best
happening?
one is
They
the
get
tire.
warm. Right?
I'll draw a picture of a tire, and
Yeah.
I'll say, "Here's a tire rolling
You don't
at
draw a
100
picture,
kilometers
you
an
throw
hour."
a tire at them, don't you?
Well, that's the lab portion. But the theory portion, I draw a tire, and I'll be like, "Look, this car's moving at 100 kilometers an hour. How fast is the tire going?" And they'll be like, "Well, tire's rolling at 100." I'll be like, "Well, actually, it's rolling at 200 because that's the math on that."
Right.
But I go, "Don't worry about that right now. Let's go with you. The car's at 100, the tire's at 100." And I draw the contact patch between the tire and the road,
What is it? Yeah.
and then I'll be like, "Is this static?"
or
Or
dynamic.
dynamic. And because I used the word rolling, and drew speed, they'll be like, well, that contact patch is kinetic. Like, no, it's static.
Yeah.
That usually blows their mind.
Yeah.
The bottle sitting on the table, they get because nothing's moving.
Yeah.
But then you have a rolling tire, like, yeah, that's also static.
Yeah.
And then usually if you weed it out, you might get somebody who actually knows an answer or has an idea. But most of the time, you got to explain it.
Right.
Right. This is why a moving tire is actually static. It's always a new portion of the tire meeting a new portion of the road.
Yeah.
Until the brakes are locked up.
Until you lock up and you get that.
There you
And
go.
you switch
And that's the
rolls.
same thing. I say, what happens to the tire? It gets real hot, just like your hands.
Yeah.
Now you got that kinetic.
And because the COF is above 1.0, material is exchanged.
Yep.
Don't believe me? Look behind you. Black skid marks. Look at your tire. It's
Look in front of you. There's a bumper coming up real quick.
yeah, it's round in 90% of its circumference, but then there's that one flat section.
All right. Speaking of the brakes there, how many feet does it take to stop a car from 60 miles an hour?
So your average vehicle, like what, 3,000 pound vehicle?
No, two.
2,000
feet.
pounds.
2 feet.
Two
The clutch and the brake.
And we're going to say stopping distance? 112 feet.
Jay,
112 feet.
Let me do math.
This is the
Let me do
Flintstones.
math.
Yabba dabba doo. 2 feet.
Is that going to be on the test?
Yeah. It takes 1 foot, your driver's foot. But if you want to know distance, is that what we're asking?
We're
the actual
talking
distance?
about clutches. It was a joke.
was a joke.
We can
That
actually
was a
answer
joke.
it.
You know what? I
We can
tried to
do
do
the
some
math.
research and it just bombed.
I mean,
All
I'm,
right, let me
I'm standing by 112 feet, but
Okay.
you didn't tell me road condition.
Stick to the knock knock
What's
jokes.
the ambient humidity?
Oh my
What's the tread
god.
like
Okay,
like?
let's
What's the COF in your scenario?
Yeah. Are you driving the car? Because that's another 300 pounds.
Hey now.
No,
Now it's gotten personal.
it affects my math.
I'm not 300 pounds yet. I'll get there. But
You'll get down to there. Yeah.
You'll get down to
You'll get down to there.
All right. At the end of every episode,
You buy lunch
well, we're running out of time for that, but
for that.
Yeah.
We could have cut this thing shorter and had lunch.
I have 2 questions.
All right.
First question for both of you. If you could be one person at any time in the world, who would you be?
I'm okay with being myself. Is this a trick?
You and
Okay,
Colin.
we'll
eh?
take it.
You and
Yeah.
Colin.
I don't want to be Colin.
Colin wanted to be some
Oh, that's right.
scientist.
Some scientist.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Is Spider-Man a person?
Yeah. Anything. You want to be Spider-Man? That would
Now
make
it's like
perfect
which
sense.
Spider-Man do you want to be? Because
Spider-Man. It's the same with Batman. That's
Yeah.
cool.
I can always say no one's ever asked me that question before. That's a good one.
Yeah, I also don't put thought into stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm asking you to.
No, I'm fine the way I am.
Okay.
It's
you
too much
could have
work
been
to
Optimus
change.
Prime, man. I know you want to be
Optimus
Optimus
Prime
Prime.
would be pretty good, yeah.
Now you're like, man, I'm
Yeah.
thinking about this all the time.
I don't know if there's someone that I'd actually want to be, but like maybe just seeing other people, like especially like some of the like famous people or like people that have invented things, like seeing how they came up with that. Watching them. It's I don't know.
It's all aliens,
That's
man.
Colin's answer. That's
That
what
was
Colin was
Colin's
saying.
But
Yeah.
I can't
Why,
think of
why
anyone
so
that
deep? Why you guys sound so good?
I don't know.
Just be like
I'm
me.
on radio. I want to sound good.
All right. We may have to change this question up.
Yeah, get rid of that question. It's awful.
Okay. If you had one car to drive for the day, anything in the world, what would you pick?
I don't like cars.
One motorcycle, one
there
anything,
you
one
go.
automobile,
One vehicle.
one vehicle. Could be
Yeah,
plane.
I'm an R1 guy.
R1.
Yeah, it's an R1. I wouldn't mind getting on the new 23s, 24s. Yeah. It's been a while.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think they've made some improvements in the last 20 years. I wouldn't mind taking a stab at it.
I want to drive what year Neon do you want, Alistair?
Oh, Neon, yeah.
Cruiser.
It's got to be that hunter green. Got to be the hunter green.
I'd want to drive like one of those like Baja like off-road trucks.
Okay.
Like a sand rail.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
a sand rail.
Yeah.
Just go nuts.
Oh,
Go in
yeah,
the desert
changing
or
my
whatever.
answer. I want a Dakar Rally
Let's go.
bike.
We gotta get it,
Yeah, we're
Jay.
going to the desert.
We
Jay's
want
like,
two
man,
of
I'm going to have
these.
to think about things now.
Yeah. No, that's good. That was way better than my answer.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah, I do some rail jumping, sand
Yeah.
dunes. That's cool.
Yeah, even on the streets of Toronto, I'll just rip it all over sidewalks, whatever. Who cares?
It's someone else's car
Yeah.
the next day, so you're
Yeah,
fine.
I don't own it, right? I didn't buy it. You're just giving me the keys, right? So
Yeah, going for a
That's your
tank ride would be
mistake.
pretty fun too.
Tank ride?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like an old abandoned farm where we're just going to demo it anyway. Just drive through everything.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of fun.
Watch out for that house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
what-
else?
What house?
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
We'll
Thanks for
have to
having
get
us,
you
yeah.
on again and chat a bit more.
No,
about
no,
we can
once
talk
is
about
good.
those
Once
fancy
is
terms
good.
that we don't know.
Yeah, once is good.
Yeah, like what was that?
Uh,
Centrifugal clutch.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Dual
Center force
mass
clutches.
flywheel, whatever that is.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's more stuff to hit. Well,
Yeah, I
this
just
will
I
have to
saw
be a
all the
segment.
parts counter. It just looked good.
So this is this has been the third podcast.
Third podcast,
Wow,
so
I
third
feel
one.
privileged to be on so early. I like it.
Well, you're a special guy.
appreciate
I'm
it.
glad you're here.
I was forced.
He was.
I was promised lunch though.
Yeah,
I mean, I bought it yesterday.
That's true.
that was my non-contact day. Perfect.
Guys, thanks so much again. And until next time, we got to figure out a good.
We still don't have a good
we don't
outro.
we don't have an outro.
Signing off.
Yeah. Oh,
No, he
you want
doesn't
like a
like
catchphrase or something?
Yeah. Do you have one?
Well, appropriate or? I have lots of catchphrases. My students are familiar with that.
Autobots.
Yeah.
Autobots roll out.
Yeah,
that might be
Jay's.
copyrighted.
I think that's yeah. You know
Well,
what? It might be an
generally,
issue.
They like what's one of the ones I always use, and then they start using my catchphrases back. Like when I'm teaching alignment, especially, right? Always see the angle of the dangle. And
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't
not
know what
sure.
those guys are thinking. Yeah, they just
Yeah.
that becomes a catchphrase. Yeah, all mine are inappropriate like that.
All right. And until next time, cheers, folks.
All right. See you guys.
Take care.
All right, later.
Bye.